Welcome to Talking New York Real Estate with Vince Rocco. Our show is all about the exciting world of real estate and in particular, how it relates to the luxury New York marketplace. But if you are not planning a real estate transaction in New York, we still have plenty of information you can use no matter where you are. Now, here's our show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. New York City real estate is a global phenomenon, so let's get right to what everyone is talking about. I'm Vince Rocco in New York, where the state of our industry is more about luxury than ever before. For years, luxury was easy to define. It was measured by price, prestige, and the things people could see. Today, it's becoming something much more personal. Affluent consumers aren't simply buying expensive things, they're curating a lifestyle. Travel often inspires that vision. A memorable destination or exceptional hospitality experience plants a seed, while real estate makes it permanent. A home becomes more than an investment. It becomes the foundation for how people want to live. Today's luxury buyers value privacy, wellness, time, and meaningful experience as much as, if not more than, visible displays of wealth. They're willing to spend, but only when quality, authenticity, service, and emotional value justify the investment. So what does that mean for New York City real estate? It means buyers are looking beyond square footage and location. They're searching for homes that support their lifestyle, reflect the values they have, and deliver an experience, not just an address. Joining me today are two guests who view this evolution from different but complementary perspectives. Mickey brings the world of luxury travel and hospitality, where aspirations are born, and Jared brings the frontline perspective from New York City's luxury real estate market, where those aspirations become reality. Because today, luxury isn't about owning more, it's about living better. And here on set with me today are Jared Anton from Brown Harris Stevens and Mickey Alam Khan from Luxury Roundtable, and they join me now to discuss. But first, let me welcome my listeners and viewers from across the United States and all around the globe. This is Talking New York Real Estate, so let's go behind the headlines and inside the state of our industry.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So we're going to talk a little bit about luxury today, but luxury from two different perspectives. You know, in the real estate world, and Jared will talk about this in a bit, you know, we always define real estate luxury by purchase price or the size of the apartment or the block that it's on, Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue, whatever, Park Avenue. But there's a lot more to luxury than meets the eye, and Mickey's here and is going to help us understand it too. I call it stuff, okay? Yeah. Stuff that we buy, luxury things that we buy, vacations that we go on, trips that we go on, stuff that we really come to live for, enjoy, etc. So, Mickey, you know, let me start with you. How has your definition of luxury changed over the past 5 years? And what are people buying or valuing that they maybe didn't do before? So what's different in the luxury world from a stuff perspective?
Right. And thank you so much, Vince and
My
Jared.
pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Look, the definition of luxury does not change. I mean, luxury stands for quality, stands for creativity, it stands for excellence in service. But people's perception of luxury changes with generations and with the times. And I think I always stand by whatever you do in luxury, quality has to underpin it, whether it's a product or it's a service. That is why people buy luxury, because they're buying quality. They're not buying the marketing. Unfortunately, what's happening today is a lot of luxury brands emphasize the marketing over the intrinsic value as well as the quality and the customer experience. So coming to your question of what has changed in the last 5 years, I think in the last 5 years, some of the big luxury groups went into overdrive by trying to push as much product as possible in the market. That created a problem of authenticity. You see?
Big word with me, authenticity.
People they quickly cottoned on to the fact that the same handbag that cost $5,000 right before COVID is now a triple in value, in price. So they said, what changed? All right, you can account for inflation, labor costs, and all that kind of stuff. So they quickly realized that these brands were cashing in on their name, but they didn't make the case to the customer in the price-value equation. So I think the customer view of luxury has changed in terms of authenticity and how they view, does the brand align with their values? So to me, that is the number one change. And that obviously affects everybody from the aspirational market at the bottom to the mid-tier market where, these are the solid, loyal followers of luxury brands. And then, of course, you got the ultra-high net worth who, no matter what, if they've got an affinity to a brand, they're serviced well and, they'll be loyal. But at the end of the day, everybody wants to feel like they're buying into the story, but they're not being taken in for a ride.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about products and or experiences. So, is in this move from collecting products to collecting experiences, right? Where do you see, the reaction of pricing changes or people's accepting of you have a product, but yet now you have an experience? How does that kind of blend with each other to really kind of formulate what we call, the luxury, what I call the luxury buying experience? And what do people get out of it? Is it more of an experience or is it really still that product?
Well, if you take away hospitality and travel, luxury is still about product. You see, people are still buying something tangible. They're buying a table, they're buying a car, they're buying a jet.
A certain watch brand over another.
A certain watch brand. So you can't lose sight of that fact.
Yeah.
What people want is the experience that comes out of that transaction or that comes out of the product itself. So when you buy a car, you want the experience before buying the car to be flawless. You want it while you're buying the car, and then you want the post-sales experience to be flawless. That is what we call experience throughout. So experience is an overlay over product, and that's how you should view it. When you go into a retail store, yes, you see all the merchandise out there, but it's the way the associate greets you or the way you navigate the store and feel comfortable without being overwhelmed or intimidated. That's an experience too. So you cannot isolate experience versus product. They go hand in hand now.
Jared, so where does real estate fit into today's luxury hierarchy? Is it primarily rather an investment, a lifestyle choice, a legacy asset, or something else entirely?
Well, I think this is the unique part about real estate is that it's all three, right? Real estate is an investment, real estate is an experience, and real estate can also be a legacy tool, right? So real estate is a very interesting vehicle in that it crosses all of that based upon how you want it to be determined, right? And I think the interesting piece, we talk about luxury, right? But within luxury, there are so many layers in terms of the price piece, right? From that affordable luxury or approachable luxury, all the way up to the super exclusive. And, while the luxury consumer set has been expanding over the last, 20, 30 years, there has also been even more of a spread within that subset, right? And I think part of what we have to look at, piggybacking on some of what Mickey was talking about, is the intent of the consumer, right? So for people at, let's say, the lower levels of that luxury, right? More in that approachable or affordable luxury, they're often buying not necessarily for the experience or for the good, they're buying for the perception, right? So they're buying because of the way that others will perceive them and more of a status symbol. When you reach the higher levels of it, it is incredibly less about impressing others. Actually, they rather the understated luxury and the fact that it is not opulent or flashy, right? It's why if you look at certain brands, again, those in the lower stratosphere of that luxury are going to be more likely to splash their logos of their brand and across the product in a visible way because it satisfies that consumer that's looking at it from a status symbol. But in the highest of highest ends, the brand is almost imperceptible on it, because there's a design detail or something other than the name on there. So I think we also have to be conscious as we go through today's discussion about being aware about what side or what level in the luxury we are, because there are vastly different experiences and consumer demands and reasons why the consumer is undertaking such purchase or experience.
I agree. You mentioned the word status, and I 100% agree with that. And I sometimes struggle with thinking, do people really only think about whether it's a product or an experience or whether it's real estate and an experience? Are they really thinking about the status of it all? Or are they really kind of thinking of, well, the overall picture of what luxury is or should be? I mean, I as a real estate agent myself, I kind of get stuck on the status because I agree with what you said before. And I wonder, is a status symbol of an apartment really what it's about?
I mean, we'll come to this a little bit later, but I think there's certain buildings, that have developed a certain cult following where there is a certain perception that, you're part of the club if you live in that building, right? Or in some extent, branded residences, which are just by nature less popular in New York City, but incredibly popular in Miami, are pulling from sort of that brand affinity or that perception piece. So it can, but it comes up differently in real estate, I would say.
Okay. Mickey, how often does travel become the catalyst for a real estate purchase, right? We go to exotic places. We say, oh, my God, I have to live there, or I have to buy a vacation, or whatever. Have you seen clients fall in love with a destination, and then all of a sudden they decide to own there? I mean, in my personal, world orbit, I know lots of people who fall for that.
And Vince, that has been a trend for decades, if not centuries. Travel has always been an entry for people to change their lifestyle or bring back stuff from other markets into their own homes. Most recently, in the 80s and 90s, I'd say a brand such as Four Seasons was the biggest influencer in, how homes were modeled and designed.
Indeed.
And, the beige, the greige. So people have always looked to travel to resorts and destinations for inspiration. You look at the Moroccan chic ethic, you look at the south of France, you look at Italy, the UK, the country look. So you have these various categories, and what you're doing is you're buying the idea of a lifestyle. You're saying that I identify with that country or that market's values or what it stands for. So travel is very important. In fact, in the real estate context, I find it very smart of brokerages when they open offices in hotels. And I mean, I used to go regularly to Palm Springs, Palm Desert over the years, attend conferences. I love the market. I used to live in LA many years ago. And the fact is that I used to go to the JW Marriott for conferences in Palm Desert. And you'd have a brokerage office there. And I'd always see customers sitting with the broker. And they were discussing stuff. Now, I would find out later on, those people used to come to the JW for years, and they finally decided, all right, let's push the button and let's make a purchase. So, when I used to run Luxury Portfolio, I'd have our members in France, they'd have offices at airports. And what they do is they basically have these small little offices where the brokers would sit, and then basically travelers are whiling away their time, and they'd basically go there. So travel is important. People are buying the lifestyle. They're looking at that venue and saying, they're all right, if I want to have a second home in that market too, is this someplace I can invite family and friends? So it works both ways. One, you bring the influences back to your market, and second, you buy there.
So that's an emotional trigger.
Yes.
Right? What about a practical trigger? What's practical about that? I mean, we've all gone to locations and I've been to Palm Springs many times in my IBM days on business and whatever, a lot of other markets. Outside of the emotional, what's that, that real practical trigger?
Not everything we do in life is practical.
It's not a fact.
And I think that should apply to real estate too. I think we make a fundamental mistake in real estate to always use economics as the sole barometer. We have a limited time on earth. You've made money. You've worked hard. That is a reward. You've earned that. So whenever you look at purchases in resorts, second or third homes, economics should not apply, because you're not looking at that. I mean, when you're looking at very wealthy people, they're very astute about their money, but they're also looking at quality of life. They want to get away from the dreariness or from the pressures of their main residence and their home city. So I think the second home market is a market, while the value of the property is important, you should not purely sell it on economics. It always has to be. Look at the Hamptons, right? The Hamptons have gone up and down, up and down. I mean, in the Great Recession, you couldn't sell a home. They were all white elephants. right? Today, go to the Hamptons and see what's going on there, right? And people have to remember that those markets, they improve your quality of life. A second home is always a quality of life discussion.
You know, I was going to say Hamptons, and it's so funny you bring it up because I spent years not owning in the Hamptons, but renting in the Hamptons every summer. I mean, crazy. And I sit back sometimes now and think, was that emotional? Was that status? Was that practical? And you know what? I probably can't say any of that applied. It was just a thing to do.
Made you feel good.
That
It made you feel
made
good.
you feel good. It was a feel good kind of whatever. So maybe that is emotional. I don't know. But it was fun. We had a good time. But I tend to think, and I'm going to ask Jared this question in a minute, I tend to think that people buy here for the same reasons. It feels good to own something in New York. It feels good to have what my dad used to say, a piece of the rock, you know, wherever that rock was. Do you think people buy here for that reason, Jared? I mean, is it like, I need to buy in New York? You know, we all go through, I have to buy, I need to buy, you know, I should buy. What is that impetus, you know, generally speaking?
From a global standpoint, you know, owning a piece of New York City or Manhattan in particular is generally seen as a status symbol, right? So from a global international consumer perspective, right? And then you boil it down, as we talked about before, there are certain buildings that have certain reputations or have certain people, and then essentially you're buying into the club, right? It's no different than if you were joining a specific country club or some other group of people. Some buildings in our market, as other markets have become this sort of club within a club. And, you know, Mickey's correct that, you know, much of what, when we talk about a luxury purchase, is all about how do they get back time? How do they improve their quality of life? So it's a calculated decision that spending this money is going to result in X amount of satisfaction, sure, or X amount of time saved, or X amount of minutia removed from their day, right? And that's true in looking at, you know, the incredible amount of house staff, right, and the demand that has gone through the roofs for that. There was an article recently talking about how, you know, private chefs are commanding $300,000 plus, especially if, you know, they're incredibly skilled at, you know, restrictive diets. You know, having house managers, you know, $250,000, right, to come alongside and manage it and manage all the other staff. So these luxury families and luxury individuals are building, you know, C-suite level corporate staff around them that's meant to insulate all of them. So all of this comes together and says, okay, so how does this collection of purchases mean that my quality of time is better spent, right? And the private jet is a great example. It is fundamentally not an economical purchase. No one can ever argue that on a dollar and cents, it makes fundamental sense to own a jet. Between the insurance, the maintenance, the staff,
everything,
the upkeep, the fuel, you know, you can go and fly the best, you know, public, you know, transportation and take first class, but they do it because their time cannot be bought in that way. So you want to be able to leave, you know, at 10 p.m. or 6 a.m. or fly overnight. So they do it because time then outweighs every other, you know, line item that you can put in a spreadsheet to say that this actually makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, to Jared's point, if you buy a yacht, right, 10% of the yacht's cost is what you should budget for every year in terms of maintenance. That's what it is.
10%.
Right? 10%. So if a yacht costs you $40 million, your running costs per year are 10%. And that's what it is.
Right. Wow.
And there is no practicality in that. But, you know, the psychology of the rich is such that when you climb the ladder and you accumulate more wealth, what you're trying to shut out is noise. Everything.
It's privacy, right?
The privacy, whether it's privacy, security, access of people to you. The higher you go, the quieter you want your life to be.
But doesn't that sometimes attract more attention to you and maybe more noise or more?
Well, some people don't want noise. They want noise. They don't want to. They want to maintain their current, you know, decibel level with society. Some people don't. But the fact is that you want to control as much as possible.
Right. Correct.
Within your circle of influence.
No, I agree.
And that's what wealth gives you.
Right.
It gives you control over things that you can do, whether it's health, whether it's economics, whether it's education, whatever.
Okay, we got to take a quick break. We're coming right back for block number 2 with more on this luxury stuff and real estate right after these messages. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So, Mickey, luxury brands, and you named the Four Seasons before, and boy, I can completely and totally relate to Four Seasons. But Hermes, Rolls-Royce, Four Seasons have an incredible loyal, following of clients. What lessons should luxury real estate professionals borrow from those brands?
Vince, the three brands you named, Rolls-Royce, Hermes, and who's the third?
Four Seasons.
Four Seasons. I should remember that.
That's true.
The one defining factor across these three brands is their customer loyalty. Whenever you look at Hermes's earnings releases, there's always this statement in that release talking about the fact that they focus on quality, they focus on creativity, and the loyalty of their existing clients. You see? So whatever they do, they want to develop a consistent customer experience, consistent product quality. There has to be consistency. Hermes does that. You look at Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce is the epitome of customization. You cannot walk into a Rolls-Royce dealership and buy a car off the shelf. You have to sit down with the Rolls-Royce designer and design a car. All right?
I know that.
You make it one of a kind.
Okay.
And they limit Rolls-Royces to 6,000 cars a year. So it's very exclusive. So that is their strategy, extreme customization, personalization, exclusivity. Hermes is quality product, seamless customer experience in store, and the best and finest materials, whether it's leather or it's silk. And when you look at Four Seasons, it's institutional memory of who you are as a customer. Once the Four Seasons concierge knows who you are, they've memorized all these details. Though you walk into the foyer, they will remember who you are. They'll call you by your name. They'll know your choices. They're the pioneers in all of this stuff. And they've institutionalized that knowledge. And when you go into their rooms and suites, there's a sense of calm. You see? And that's what you're in a hotel for if you're there for leisure. You're there to shed your worries. And you walk into a Four Seasons, and the colors are calming, the textures are soft. So each one of these brands that you mentioned, pays very, very fine attention to the product quality and the experience you get.
So, as real estate professionals, you and I and many others, what should we borrow from what Mickey just said when we're designing a home for our clients or helping them decide where they should live, what it should be, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, first, we need to understand, again, back to the word intent. So what are they looking to achieve? Why are they looking to achieve it? And then, people don't need more information, right? Our job is not to give them information. Our job is to help distill the information so that they can make the best decision for their set of circumstances. So as a luxury real estate advisor, so that's a key piece, right? We're not selling anything. As I like to say, the fact that real estate is bought or sold is a result of us doing our job, right? That's not our job to do that. Our job is to advise them to help them achieve their real estate aspirations. So what does a competent professional need to do? They need to understand, the mindset of that consumer, again, whether they're on the buy or the sell side, understand the intent, what they're looking to achieve, and then align the information and the distillation of that information to help them be able to compare the set of properties, right? The client may come in with a certain set of preconceived notions, and maybe those are right or maybe those are incorrect. So how do we go through that? Does the client have a set in saying, hey, I'm only going to buy in one of these 4 buildings? And how do we go and help prospect through our knowledge of the owners or off-market opportunities to procure that? Or if they have a little bit more of a variety in terms of what they're open to, then how do we bring forth the best curated options so that we can manifest a day of showings that is tight and coordinate it so that we're not wasting, again, their precious time, and that we're creating then an experience, whether that's with a chauffeured car, whether that's with a great lunch or experience afterwards. Because again, even in the touring of properties should be an experience that ties it all together. And especially if the consumer is not familiar with our city, then how do we put in a little bit of sightseeing and tourism so that they can get a flavor of the city interspersed in a day of touring luxury
Now,
properties?
you're an executive sales person here in our company, and I'm just a little old agent. But so my question to you is, do we have that capability as agents in general to do exactly what you just said, to understand what luxury really is, to be able to curate what is really right for a customer? Or do we just, I mean, you know how insane and intense and crazy this business can be, right? I got a buyer, and you run around and see 100 different properties and they don't buy anything because you don't do your job right. Do you think we really can do that?
I think a certain set of agents who have built their business around this type of consumer can absolutely do it. I don't think it's the majority of the agents, right? In part because to be successful in this, you both need that network, but you also then need the ability to have a team around you that allows you to be present in the moment with the client so that that client feels like you're their only client. Now, of course, that client's not going to be your only client, but you need that army of people behind you that can manifest that day. So can people do it? Yes. But does it take an army around you to be successful? Of course.
May I take a step?
Yeah, absolutely.
Too?
Sure.
So, to Jared's point, I have a thing called the double A. An agent should have authentic authority. You see? And I'll just give you an example.
You should come and teach my classes with me, okay? Because, I mean, you just said it. Go ahead.
No, but I work with, obviously I host conferences and, I also have a real estate background. And when I have to invite top agents to speak at our events, I pick up the phone. I'm a phone guy, if I can. And if I email, there are 1 or 2 lines. I don't like leaving too much of a paper trail. I've lived through the Merrill Lynch scandals and all that else, this thing. But the fact is, the biggest agents that I work with, they'll answer within 3 rings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
And they'll
I
take
answer
the call.
my phone.
They'll take the call. That is the very first experience, accessibility to your client, the prospect. And the thing is that clients, at the end of the day, they have money. They don't have the knowledge. They may have the information.
Yeah.
You have the knowledge. And you have to showcase that knowledge without being overly aggressive or arrogant. But they're looking to you for guidance in that area. Like when they walk into a financial advisor's office, they're looking for guidance with finances. And they will never question the financial advisor unless he or she is giving very odd advice. Same thing with their CPAs. So when you talk about real estate, top agents should have that same level of confidence that they know what's good for the client, sometimes more than the client may know, but it's a very delicate balance without, offending the client.
Absolutely. Jared, what shifts are you seeing among affluent buyers that don't show up in industry reports or market reports? I mean, where are things shifting for the very affluent buyer here in New York City?
Generally speaking, it's going to be quality over size, right? Now, there are certain situations where, again, if we're talking about a family apartment, then sure, it needs to be of a certain size. But generally speaking, people will want to buy, when we're talking about second, third, fourth, fifth properties, they're going to buy better quality, less of the space, in part because it's less to manage and upkeep, but because they want the higher ceilings, they want the more open entertaining, they want the great views and light, they want the things that are not repeatable, right, or replicatable in the property. Wellness, clean air, recirculation systems, being able to have, energy independence if we're talking about a property that may not be in the city, having all the amenities there around. So again, if we're talking about a country home or a second home outside the city, then the ability to curate, as Mickey talked about, the environment, the ability to have everything they need at their fingertips is really incredibly important. And then the ability that can also be positioned in a legacy, way. Is it bought in a trust? How is that real estate then insulated from liability or lawsuits or taxation to some extent? So real estate creates a vehicle to be able to do a lot of other things beyond just the enjoyment or the lifestyle or the family sort of nucleus that it can offer.
Luxury buyers aren't all the same, and we've talked about that, as you've said, as Jared said. How do the priorities, and you mentioned the word before, aspirational luxury buyers differ from high net worth or ultra high net worth clients? Because there is a difference.
There is a difference. And unfortunately, what's happened is everyone wants to walk away from the word luxury because of that. Because, very often these luxury brands are trying to appeal to the aspirational market, forgetting the fact that the people who brought you here were the people who were discerning, who paid for quality and who paid for limited distribution. So given the fact that, the new luxury model is only 20 years old, Bernard Arnault, who is the CEO of LVMH, which owns Louis Vuitton and L'European and Dior, he fundamentally changed the economics of the business. Prior to his buying Dior and all that, it was an artisanal, 5 stores, family-run business. Then they ran into trouble because they ran out of funding, and then this guy comes in, ironically from the real estate business and from the industrial space, and he changes the economics of the business. So what's happened is, as these companies try to scale, they have to depend heavily on the aspiration market to basically feed into the funnel from the bottom, all right? That aspiration market is very stressed right now, all right? And what's happened is the mid-tier market feels, the guys in the middle feel they're not recognized for basically being the fundamental support of a brand, all right? But you need to still pay attention to the aspiration market because this is the one, they are going to climb up the ladder. Same thing with real estate. You sell that 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom, and then basically you build a relationship, and eventually it turns into a 3 bedroom. There's a life change, marriage, whatever.
100%.
So luxury is at a point now where your strategy for the ultra high net worth and your strategy for the rest of the market is diverging. And we are living in 2 worlds of luxury. There's a world of real luxury, and there's the world of affordable. I don't like to call it affordable because it's an oxymoron, affordable luxury.
Approachable.
But approachable is a better word, right? You do need that. It's the same thing what Hermes did. A few years ago, Hermes realized that they were missing out the boom in the beauty market. So what did they do? They came up with the lipstick line and the eyeliners and mascara line. Each Hermes lipstick in those days, about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, cost about $75. Way more than all the other ones, right? Guess what? They sold out. They already had a line of perfumes. Now you've got this. Guess what? You get young women into the market. That's a new gifting product. You get the Hermes Allure and the Aura for $100.
It's a gateway product.
It's a gateway product. So you can never ignore the aspiration market because, to Jared's point, they're the gateway to the funnel. Because if they're right in the way they work their career, they will ultimately become the next generation of people who are successful and wealthy.
Can you define what a perceived market is based on what you just said? The perception sometimes, I think, outweighs whether you can afford something, whether you can not afford something, but you really want to have it because of what Jared said before, the status of it all. I mean, for example, there was a TV documentary on recently about John F. Kennedy Jr. and his wife. I forgot the name of it, but immediately after, and they were such, figures in this town. I'm old enough to remember how they influenced everything and everybody. But I remember after that series ended, and this is only a couple of months ago, there was a store downtown in the village that used to sell these headbands that she used to wear all the time. Yeah. When the show went off the air, that store was whacked and inundated with every girl had to have these headbands. And they were wearing them all over the place. And I thought, really?
Well,
so there's a little bit of that too, based on what we see and hear and watch, whatever. But how does it really transfer into solid, luxury mindset.
Well,
That's just like today and they'll forget about it tomorrow.
yeah, but luxury, you embrace a luxury lifestyle based on whether it's the family you're born into. For
Well,
them,
that
it's
too,
just,
yeah.
it is, for them, the Todd's loafers are their kids, basically, right? Then you have people who are influenced by role models. So when you look at Caroline Bessette Kennedy, she was, those white shirts that, every time they run photographs of her wearing the white shirts and all that, I'm sure sales go up because she was a role model, the clean look, the 90s look of white shirts, blue jeans, right? So you have people like that who influence, whether it's through media or through TV shows. Billionaire. When Billionaire ran on TV, the hats. Laura Piano sold out all those hats because they were logoless. Right. So you'll always have that market. Right. But when you look at the very rich or the high net worth, they're seeing what their peers are wearing. You see? So they're not looking at media and all that. If your colleague is basically buying a Goyard bag for their dog, that's what you're going to do because
even if you don't have a dog.
Even if you don't have a dog.
Think about that, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's always
gotta have it.
It's the pure influence in the ultra high net worth that accounts for luxury sales there. It's also a lot of the young wealthy today are very knowledgeable. They do a lot of research, and with AI now, you can practically be more knowledgeable than the sales associate in the store. So I always say a self-informed customer is a self-directed customer, you see? And that's what's happening. They're walking into these stores knowing more than the staff there. So these people know exactly what they want. They're curating their lives, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok and in real life.
100%. Am I a role model, Jared, today with my yellow shirt? Oh, no, just kidding.
100%.
I'm only kidding. What is the biggest misconception agents have about the wealthy consumer, or what's the reality when they're faced with a wealthy person wanting to buy something?
They're not any more willing to part with their money than any other consumer. To some extent, working with the $10 million buyer can be more difficult than working with the $1 million buyer, right? There's a unique set of challenges. You have a limited time, within their attention span. You'll be working with and through their staff. They may feel entitled where the rules don't apply to them. And in the world of condo or co-op packages, unfortunately, that's a great equalizer. So you also have to understand where they're coming from, right? And this cannot be about you, the agent, making money out of the transaction. This has to be approaching it through a purely altruistic sort of mindset, which, yes, if you do your job, correctly, will result in economic benefit. But you can't lead with that, right? So this can't be counting your chickens before they hatch kind of thing. And you truly need to be providing true value. And how is that done? It's by making good use of their time, having good information, distilling that information, giving good recommendations, but more importantly, position yourself then as a quarterback that can now not just bring together all the different deal parties that are typically needed for a real estate transaction, but know then how you have to interlay with their counsel, with their financial advisor, with their CPA, with whoever else is in their sphere of influence or orbit. And keep in mind, too, that there is often a inherent conflict between someone's financial advisor and the real estate advisor, right? Because if you're taking assets out of a financial portfolio where that advisor is getting paid, a basis point on, and you're directing that into real estate. So be aware, and I've been part of many of these conversations, where there has been this conflict. And truthfully, many banks also now have these liquidity access lines or the like, where both parties can benefit because you're not actually liquidating the securities, you're taking a loan against it, which, in many financial planning could be a really good opportunity. But be aware of this inherent conflict, right? And this is not giving financial advice, but for how many years in a row, especially given everything else going on in the world and coming to a midterm, how many more years can the stock market continue returning the returns it is? So at what point does being able to take some money out, being able to take a hedge and purchase into real estate, where does that make sense, right? And we've talked about, in New York City in particular, we've now had about 11 years of essentially flat prices, right?
Correct.
Where we haven't had price movement. I was looking at a listing just yesterday where, this owner bought something in 2009, and when you factor in what she renovated, the closing costs, she'll break even at best right now today. So, prices now have started to come out or we're about 2 to 3% above where we were in that last peak. Over the last 12 to 14 months, we've seen some positive price movement. And there are some early signs that Manhattan is looking to break out of that narrow price channel where we've been for the last 11 years, where the market's firming up, demand's holding, supply's decreasing, and negotiability is shrinking. So all of that is to say that this is part of this conversation now about understanding where in the world do we look, which markets make sense as a real estate professional, not just knowing your home market, but understanding where to point to, and then having a knowledgeable conversation with the client and with their financial advisor as needed about how, these returns could now be different than they were in the past is going to be really important.
I totally agree. Hold it 1 second. We got to take a quick break. We're coming right back after these messages. Our sponsors have to have time to sell their stuff, all luxury, of course. Don't go anywhere.
This podcast is supported by the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. Real estate touches every aspect of our lives, from design and architecture to investing and the economy. Now there's a way to get all your real estate information in one place, the More Network. With more than 20 podcast and webcast series, the Mastery of Real Estate Network is powered by Brown Harris Stevens, one of the country's most distinguished brokerages. Discover advice from notable entrepreneurs, compelling topics, and access to top global real estate experts. Subscribe to their YouTube and Apple podcast channels by visiting getmorenetwork.com.
Okay, we are back. Mickey, I'm sorry. You wanted to say something.
Yes. And, for the entry-level luxury product, if you look at the mortgage rates now, they're almost, 6, depending on,
Almost 7, 6.5,
yeah.
whatever, yeah.
But now,
Six and change.
yeah, you have as many people who are basically buying homes at that rate versus the 3%
Correct.
rate, right?
Correct.
So even that argument goes away now, that the 3%. The thing is that with New York product, as Jared pointed out, sometimes it's not purely an economic decision, right? When you buy an apartment for $5 million and you pay cash, think about your outgoings, the common charges, the insurance,
Carrying cost.
the carrying
You had a tariff
costs.
surcharge.
Everything. So at that point, it's not purely an economic discussion. You have to shift for markets like New York and California. They cannot be purely based on flip value or purely on appreciation.
100%.
And in the same vein, though, keep in mind how many people are spending $50, $75, $100, $150,000 a month on rent, again, because they want it, they want the convenience of it, and they want the optionality. So we're seeing that truthfully on both sides of that equation.
If a client comes to you, Jared, and says, I want luxury, I want to buy a luxury apartment, what questions do you ask them today? You touched on some of it before, that you wouldn't have asked 5 years ago.
The first thing I'm going to ask is, what does that mean to you, right? What is your definition of luxury? Because the reality is, in my opinion, there's no definition of luxury. You can't define it, but when you see it, you know it. When you experience it, you know it. So, okay, help me understand, Vince. What is luxury to you?
Right.
And that's where we start. And then that opens up this whole conversation
about that. Starts a whole conversation.
Is it to support a lifestyle? Do they want the amenities? Is it of a certain size, a certain view? And then we can go into an actual conversation about what are some options.
Mickey, has the definition of luxury shifted from having more or having better? And you touched on a lot of that before. More is more, but better is better. And as Jared said a minute ago, quality, right? So what's going on?
Well, the definition of luxury differs for the buyer versus the seller. The seller is interested in product. The buyer is interested in product plus experience. At the end of the day, luxury is still product. And while you may not buy more of it, you still will buy. When you're buying an Hermes scarf, you're buying a piece of silk with prints on it.
Right.
Will you buy 10? No. you'll probably buy 5 if you're discerning. It depends on the individual. It's very hard to generalize. Everyone said people are buying better. I heard that argument 10 years ago, like after the Great Recession. People buy, are they buying more or are they buying better? Guess what happened? LVMH, Richemont, Kering, their sales went through the roof. People are buying stuff. The allure, the marketing, the seduction, it's very hard for customers to avoid that. We live in a consumer society. Like it or not, everyone's selling. And the question is, do you have the nerve to hold back? When you're at that very high level, you're $30 million a year, $30 million plus, or you're $100 million plus, the centimillionaires, or you're at the billionaire level, there's no question of buying less. You buy what's necessary to maintain your lifestyle. When you're looking at the aspirational, they're buying into a tribe. What does it take? What are the qualifiers to get into the tribe? In the old days, they'd buy the canvas tote from Louis Vuitton, right? Then they upgraded to the Chanel bags, the quilted bags. And before you knew it, it was Dior and this. So you're buying into the experience, but you have the building blocks of becoming a member of that tribe. So that'll always be there. Think about you. Like when you're in the market for eyeglasses, you're not going to buy a generic brand. You're going to go with one of those labels that you see there. Guess what? It's made by one Italian company, Luxottica. It's got the bloody license for everything, right? You're buying for the name and the design, right? So that mentality will always be there. Will they buy better? Yes, but they will still continue buying.
You used the word seduction a minute ago. So, my question is, so how is seduction really, across the board, and all kinds of, advertising, marketing, whatever, how effective is it really?
Very effective. In the United States, another word for seduction is marketing. It's a $500 billion business.
I think we should rename our department here, the Department of Seduction. Can I motion that to Matt?
Oh, my God. Chief Seduction Officer.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. No, but really, you're right. It is marketing, but there's something about, really kind of reeling somebody in based on whatever you put out there that may be a little different than your traditional or classic marketing event.
At the end of the day, except for the 0.01%, not one thing that luxury sells is what you need.
Right.
Not one. There's not one product from the 75 companies that are part of LVMH that are really something you need to live your life. You don't need it.
You want it.
You want it.
You want it.
And I think it's because, again, it creates this feeling, right? So is it a product? Yes. Is it an experience? Of course. But it also creates this feeling internally. So marketing is meant to be able to pull at those emotional heartstrings, right? So when you talk about, you want it for a certain perception because other people will index you a certain way, that's one thing. But you also will get a certain feeling, right? If you're carrying around a certain bag, you're wearing a certain watch, you're wearing a certain suit, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel accomplished, successful. So does it increase your confidence? Does it make you walk, a little bit faster? Does it make you stand a little bit taller? Does it make you show up in that room and present, right? Knowing too, the others will index you in good or in bad based upon that. So marketing has created this feeling, and our society, in general, has bought into it hand over fist. Again, like it or not, it is what it is. And that's what has happened, right? So it creates this sort of internal monologue where you have, a certain preconceived notion of the brand, right? You have a certain preconceived notion about how it certainly make you feel. So when you put that watch on, when you carry that bag, when you put that jacket on, you're going to internalize that in your own way, and that's what you're purchasing.
Luxury is desire manifested in a product or service.
Well said. The home is increasingly becoming a private hospitality experience, as we've all talked about, okay? What features, though, really define that today? I think immediately of new development buildings, amenities galore, rooftop gyms, you name it, I don't know, concierge services. But what features, because most of our inventory is not new development, what features define that today?
Well, I would say sort of the gold standard is now that club within a club. I think 15 CPW was one of the first condos that brought this forward. Some of the legacy co-ops had these private dining but 15 CPW, I think, was one of the first condos, if not the first. And now you've seen, about 10 to 15 other ones create this private dining, wine, all these other experiences being able to bring in. Obviously, the amenities are incredibly important too, but I think knowing that you're buying into a building of quote unquote like-minded individuals, I've brought this example up in the show before, but you look at how 220 Central Park South went through their sales process with the developer vetting, quote unquote, the buyers, with curating who was there and curating that club. It is akin to buying into a country club, right? You look at the Yellowstone Club out west, you look at these different experiences that is both real estate, lifestyle activities, country club, all wrapped in one. That is a lot of what has been done. And then you look at, beyond just the Four Seasons, but you look at some of these private resorts, all throughout the country and abroad as well. But many of them have built now a real estate component, right? Where there may be hundreds of acres, with the resort and a ton of amenities. And then they develop custom home sites, that have allowed people to be able to buy and have access to the resort facilities. I'm going to one, myself with my wife in Middleburg, Virginia next month. So they've now created this where you can go and you can vacation there, but then you want to be able to own a piece of it as well. So that now comes to creating the experience, the investment, and then the legacy.
Well, they used to call them timeshares in the past, right? I mean, similar to that. You go on vacation. I went to St. Martin. I fell in love with this place that I was staying right next door. Actually, they were soliciting on the beach. Come and talk to us in the sales office. And I ended up going home buying a timeshare.
But
so it's like, okay, I'm going to come back to St. Martin, and now I'm going to come back to my own place.
Jared mentioned Middleburg, Virginia. That's where Jackie Kennedy had an estate there.
I didn't know
and
that.
She used to ride horses right there. And they sold it after she passed away. Look, everything that Jared has described, the concierge services, the amenities, it points to one thing. The rich, the wealthy, it is their home, but they want to feel like they're not at home. And that is what luxury is.
It's a
This
mindset.
is your home, but you're not at home. So everything associated with that, escaping the current reality, they want to bring that. It comes down to peace of mind. It comes down to, shutting out noise. Why do you ask for, when you look at a branded residence, you got the restaurant from a famous chef. You've got all these facilities there because they don't want to feel like they're living an ordinary life. They want the theater in their life. So any new development
We're
that's out
dramatic,
there-
you're saying, as people, you're saying.
but that's what it is. Even when you look at 111 West 57th Street, I know that building has had issues in the past, but they got Le Bulbuquet, I always trip on the name, Le Bulbuquet, right? The restaurant that caters the meals there, right? You call them and they can, send whatever. They want to give you that exclusive experience in your home where you don't have to step out and everything's at your fingertips.
Correct.
All right. So looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what do you think the next generation of affluent buyers will expect from that today's market hasn't really fully experienced yet?
I think,
if anything.
well, look, some of the codes of luxury will stay. That's not going to change. I mentioned they'll expect quality, they'll expect customer service, they'll expect a story, the heritage, they'll expect a high perceived value. That won't change. But one thing we've not touched much on is wellness and well-being. And that is literally one of the biggest drivers now, especially in real estate, and even with non-real estate allied fields in luxury. Given the stress levels of people around the world, whether you're wealthy or not, given the fact that we're available 24/7 digitally, you may not be stressed for financial reasons. You're stressed simply because of information overload, right? You're stressed because you're available to everybody. You're stressed because when you're well off, everyone wants a piece of your time and a piece of your money, right? I see that the next 5 years will pay more attention to your health and well-being and luxury, longevity. People are more careful about the way they consume food and beverages. Why do you think alcohol sales have gone down in the last 2 or 3 years? The next generation is very aware of the downsides to consuming alcohol. They'll always drink, but not in the quantities they used to. Now you've got Ozempic and all these weight loss drugs. That has an impact on consumption of alcohol
Absolutely.
too. So you're going to see the next 5 years, while the same requirements stand, quality and all that, make me feel better. Whatever I do, whether I buy an apartment, whether I buy a shoe, whether I buy a watch, make me feel good.
Yeah. And I would add to that. So sustainability, right? Both from health and lifestyle, but also I think sustainability and how it's being made. I think the next generation is even more sort of eco-conscious. So I think that comes in from a manufacturing, from a life cycle, from a recyclability practice. I also think, again, if you play out what's happening with AI, you're going to have a larger, I think, divide between white collar, blue collar in terms of amount of leisure time and professional time, right? So I think people are going to have more time on their hands. I think they're going to be able to spend their money in different sort of ways. And I think the experience is still going to come through even more with this next generation. So yes, there's goods, but it's more about how we live in this sort of immersive digital and IRL sort of experience at the same time.
Yeah, you mentioned digital AI. How is that going to have any kind of effect? I mean, we know it's effective, but going forward, do you think that's going to really exacerbate people's thinking or decisions, or just kind of not?
To some extent, I think it'll totally transform it. But I think, too, the more that digital continues to get into every crevice of our life, I think that there's some of the core testaments to the cornerstone of luxury, that people are going to grab onto. One of the examples that I'll point to, and this is not luxury by any definition, but it points to the argument that people are now creating these landlines at home, right? Where they're taking their cell phone and they're basically creating a spot at home where they put their cell phone, and then whether or not that's their phone docking station, they actually connect like a landline to it. But people are basically saying, I need to get untethered to the digital piece. So I think as much as the digitization is going to give people back more time, which will change the consumer behavior or spending habits, at the same time, I think people are going to crave, this analog experience to be able to get away from an overload of digitization. It's the same way you're seeing a resurgence to some extent of record players, because there's this natural, crisp, sort of native sound that you can't get, from a digital soundtrack now.
Absolutely.
When it comes to AI, we talk about the benefits to us as, workers. Mm-hmm. But you have to watch what happens to the aspiration market as AI impacts their jobs.
Yes.
My worry for luxury and for every sector is if AI basically gnaws at the entry-level and mid-level jobs.
That's your feeder market, right?
That's your feeder market right there. That applies to every sector, non-luxury and luxury. That if the way things are going right now, in 5 years' time, you could have a major problem on our hands, a global economic issue, because you don't have people without purchasing power. Or, and then at that point, if the rich are getting richer, then you have societal issues where you have tension in the society because the gap between the haves and have-nots is widening dramatically.
Right.
So AI has extremely positive sides to it, but the negatives are catastrophic if it basically destroys our job market.
Right.
I got to tell you something. I was telling Mickey before the show. I asked AI, ChatGPT, to create a graphic last night, on some of the stuff that I do in this industry. And I mean, I've been using AI now for a while, here and there, whatever, but I was blown away. I did not put the company name that I work for. I did not mention Talking New York Real Estate, on and on and on. This graphic came back knowing everything about me. The graphic was done so perfectly. I was literally looking at my iPad saying, wow, how on earth?
Yeah.
So to your point, I mean, it's a little scary. I mean, I loved it and whatever, but wow. Okay.
Well, look, every new technology has always brought its own fears with it, right?
This is a little beyond.
This is the ultimate human replacement technology. It's not a complement, it's a human. So whether you're an organization or you're an individual, you have to figure out where is your place in society to make sure that you're the hunter and not the hunted. And that is the mentality you bring to this.
Well, and right down to that logo of Brown Harris Stevens. I mean, it was Brown Harris Stevens' logo. And I'm like, hey, this is scary. Oh, my God, I love working at Brown Harris. And I would have told them that if I thought about it. But well, shocking. Anyway, wrapping up this conversation. Gentlemen, thank you so much. That was very enlightening.
Thank you.
We'll be back to wrap it all up with my final thoughts right after these messages. Don't go away.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back with my final thoughts. So as we wrap up today's conversation, one thing is clear. Luxury is no longer defined by what people own. It's defined by how they choose to live. The most successful luxury brands understand that they're not selling products. They're selling trust, time, experiences, and the feeling that every detail has been thoughtfully considered. Real estate has become part of that same equation. A home is no longer just an address or an investment. For many years, it's the foundation of carefully curated life. For those of us in real estate, that means our role continues to evolve. It's no longer enough to know inventory, pricing, and market statistics. We have to understand our clients' aspirations, how they spend their time, where they travel, what inspires them, and ultimately what living well means to them. Because the best agents don't just help people buy property, they help people build a life. And that's it for this episode of Talking New York Real Estate. I tell my students all the time to take a moment to really look inward and ask themselves, who are you at your core? What is your why, the reason you get up in the morning, and the driving force behind the choices you make? What beliefs guide you, and where do they come from? Your family, your experiences, your struggles, your triumphs. Understand these pieces of yourself shapes how you move through the world. And once you know them, the challenge is to show up every day and be memorable. Every single day, not through perfection or performance, but by living with authenticity, purpose, clarity, and the courage to let people know and see the real you. Because remember, your reputation arrives before you do. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok at Vince Rocco. And Karen Kaiser Clark says, life is change, growth is optional, so choose wisely. And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I am grateful. Keep thinking the good thoughts, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.